The headline broke just after midnight. Tech mogul Daniel Voss confirmed dead in private plane crash. By morning, the news had already metastasized. Financial blogs, celebrity gossip sites, and major news outlets cycled the same image. Daniel, mid-laugh, drink in hand, frozen in opulence. His jet had gone down off the coast of British Columbia. No survivors recovered, no remains identified. Only the twisted, half-submerged tail of his aircraft confirmed the inevitable. He was 37, a self-made millionaire, founder of Sensational, a biometric tech company worth $1.3 billion. Known for his sharp mind, sharper tongue, and the string of women, left behind like expired contracts. Investors called him visionary. Employees called him dangerous. Exes rarely said anything at all, but within hours of his reported death, one thing was clear. Daniel Voss would be buried like a king. A public memorial was announced for Friday. The location? The Morrow House, a historic hall in Lower Manhattan, filled with steel, glass, and the kind of silence reserved for grief and legacy. The service would be open to close friends, colleagues, family, and media. By noon on the day of the service, black cars began lining the curb. Inside, the air smelled of lilies and politics. A massive photo of Daniel stood near the entrance. Larger than life, arms crossed, watching his own funeral with amusement. People murmured near the coffee station. Former business partners whispered in clusters. His last girlfriend, Lena Miles, stood near the front row, flawless in her designer morning dress, gripping a folded tissue like a weapon. The press was held outside, but everyone inside knew this. Wasn't just a memorial, it was a statement. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to the channel and like, spread the word, and tell us where you're watching from. Daniel Voss had died on top of the world. At 1:17 p.m. the service began. A man from his company read a statement. Another read a scripture. Lena spoke about vision, resilience, and the complicated soul I came to love. A few eyes rolled, too publicly polished for sincerity, but the room mostly nodded along. Then the doors creaked. Heads turned. Late arrivals at events like this were rare, even frowned upon. But the sight that met the guests' eyes wasn't just late. It was unexplainable. Woman in a long black coat walked slowly down the aisle. Not flashy, not styled, just composed, regal in restraint. In her right hand she held a small boy, no older than 3. He wore a tiny charcoal gray suit, his hair neatly combed. He looked around the room with innocent curiosity as guests gawked in disbelief. Whispers cracked the air like thin glass. Is that? Who is she? That child looks just like... Lena's hand slipped from the tissue. Her face froze. The woman didn't break stride. She took a seat 2 rows behind the podium, neither hiding nor making a scene. The boy climbed into her lap and nestled into her shoulder, unaware he had just split the room in 2. The eulogy paused. People stared. Only the photo of Daniel Voss kept smiling. And for the first time that day, silence meant more than grief. 3 years earlier. The first thing Maya noticed was how cold the room had become, not in temperature, but in presence. Daniel stood across from her in their Manhattan loft, his back to the skyline, jaw clenched, fists buried deep in the pockets of his designer coat. The sun was setting behind him, throwing jagged shadows across his face. A storm sat just behind his eyes, and Maya had never seen him look so calculating. So far away. "I'm pregnant," she had said quietly. The words landed like a stone dropped into still water. He didn't speak. She reached for him. "Daniel." He stepped back. "You're serious?" he asked flatly. She nodded. He laughed, once bitterly. "You're kidding me." Maya froze. "I'm not," she whispered. "It's yours." A silence pulsed between them. Then coldly, "This wasn't the plan." "There wasn't a plan," she said. "There was just us." "No," Daniel snapped. "There was me building a future. You were along for the ride." The words stunned her. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. "Not yet." I thought you'd be happy, she said. Or scared, or something human. Daniel moved to the window. You know what this does to me? To my name? My company? You think I did this on purpose? He turned sharply. Didn't you? Her face went still. I don't need this, he said. Not now. Not ever. I've got too much on the line. Maya felt the floor shift beneath her. She'd stood beside him through the late nights, the launches, the panic attacks no one else saw. She helped him rehearse pitch decks at midnight, held his head when he drank too much, told him he was enough when he didn't believe it. Now he looked at her like a liability. You're not keeping it, he added. There are ways. I can pay. No, she said, voice cracking. I'm keeping it. Something dark passed over his face. Then we're done, he said simply. He grabbed his bag, his keys, his silence, and then he walked out the door. He didn't look back. Days passed, then weeks, no calls, no texts, no apologies. When she finally tried reaching him, she was told through a third party that Daniel was unavailable. His lawyers reached out next. Papers, vague threats, an NDA offer she never signed. Then he was gone. Just gone. Paparazzi caught him months later stepping off a yacht in Cannes with a supermodel. His face was leaner. His watch was newer. His future, evidently, didn't include the past. And Maya? She vanished, left the city, changed numbers, deleted everything except one saved voicemail, a recording of him telling her, "You're the only thing in my life that feels real." She'd once played it on repeat. Now it sat on her phone like a bruise that never healed. She found a small town in Oregon, far from the noise, and gave birth alone on a cold September morning. No flowers, no phone calls, just her son, and the silence that filled the space Daniel used to occupy. She named the baby Silas, not after anyone, but after the word forest. Something quiet. Something strong. Something that, when it grows, doesn't ask permission. Maya didn't flinch as the whispers rose around her. She kept her eyes forward, hands folded in her lap. Her son, Silas, leaned into her side, swinging his feet gently over the edge of the pew. His small fingers clutched the hem of her coat, the same way he had held her hand on their long train ride to Manhattan. She could feel the room tightening around her like a noose. But she didn't look back. To the left of the altar, Lena Miles sat stiff in her seat, an untouched handkerchief on her lap. Her face, pale beneath soft makeup, twisted slightly as she caught sight of the boy beside Maya. Her lips parted as if to speak, but she didn't. Not yet. The child's presence had disrupted everything. Not just the air, not just the rhythm of mourning, but the story. Daniel's story. Lena had believed she was the final chapter, the one who would carry his name, his legacy, and eventually his child. But the resemblance was undeniable. Silas looked just like him. The same sharp jaw, the same dark eyes, the same defiant brow. And suddenly, Lena realized she didn't know who Daniel Voss had truly been. 2 years earlier. They met at a Silicon Valley gala. Lena had been covering the event as a tech features writer. Daniel had been the guest of honor. She expected arrogance. She found charm. He told her she was too smart to be underestimated and too beautiful to be trusted. She thought he was joking. He wasn't. They began a whirlwind romance, long flights, long nights, and longer silences she mistook for genius. He shared nothing about past relationships, only that attachment got in the way of momentum. She didn't pry. She thought silence meant mystery. It actually meant secrets. Back in the present, Lena's hands clenched around the handkerchief now. Maya sat just a few feet away, expression calm, as if she'd prepared for this moment 1,000 times in her mind because she had. Her seat wasn't random. It was strategic, close enough to be undeniable, far enough to be untouchable. She didn't want drama. She wanted presence. a quiet declaration that history had not been erased. Daniel's mother, seated in the front row, turned briefly. Her eyes landed on the boy. They stayed there a long time, then her lips thinned. She faced forward again. Maya felt that cut. But she didn't bleed from it anymore. She'd healed too far beyond their approval to seek it now. The eulogy resumed, some polished executive talking about Daniel's vision, his fearless leadership, and his deep commitment to family. Maya nearly laughed. Commitment? The only commitment Daniel had made was to disappear. But now, even in death, he was being forced to reappear, in Silas's jawline, in his walk, in his unspoken claim on a legacy that once tried to discard him. Silas leaned over and whispered, "Why is everyone looking at us?" She looked down at him, brushing a curl from his forehead. "Because they forgot something," she said softly, "and we just reminded them." He nodded, not fully understanding, but trusting her. As the final words of the service echoed off the high ceilings, Lena turned again, this time meeting Maya's eyes. There was no rage, just disbelief, and something deeper, fear. Because whatever Lena had thought Daniel left behind, it was no longer hers alone. The air in the conference room felt stale, like too many secrets had been stored here too long. 10 chairs lined a glass table, but only 6 were filled. The remaining seats stayed deliberately empty, as though Daniel Voss himself might walk in late, as he often did, just to remind everyone he could. But he wouldn't be walking in. He was dead. At the head of the table sat Gregory Weller, Daniel's longtime estate attorney, gray-suited, gray-templed, and unreadable. He flipped open the black binder in front of him like it contained scripture. To his right sat Lena Miles, visibly exhausted, sunglasses perched on her head though they were indoors. Her manicured fingers fidgeted with the strap of her handbag. To his left, seated silently, calm and uninvited, was Maya Rios. Her son sat beside her, swinging his feet gently beneath the table, a juice box in hand. No one spoke to them. No one asked them to leave. Gregory cleared his throat. "We are gathered to read the last will and testament of Mr. Daniel Reese Voss, filed on record January 3rd of this year, with an updated codicil dated April 18th. Lena sat upright. Wait, he updated it? Gregory didn't look at her. Yes, just months before his death. He read the standard contents first, the charitable donations, the distribution of assets, the trust for Daniel's sister, the yacht to his business partner, the Manhattan apartment to Lena, contingent upon an NDA she would be asked to sign privately. Then the room shifted. And finally, Gregory said, glancing up over his glasses, "We come to the codicil." He flipped a page with clinical slowness. This document adds a provision, naming a minor child, not yet legally recognized, as a beneficiary to the Voss family estate and trust, entitled to 40% of all residual holdings upon verified paternity. Lena's breath caught. Maya did not blink. "What child?" Lena asked. Gregory looked at Maya, then at the boy. "The document does not name the child directly," he said, "but specifies any biological offspring of Daniel Reese Voss, conceived prior to April 2020 and born thereafter." "That's..." Lena's voice cracked. "That's her child?" Gregory nodded slightly, then passed a sealed envelope across the table. Inside is a letter addressed to Ms. Rios, penned by Mr. Voss and filed with this codicil. You may open it now, or privately. The estate will recognize your child's claim, pending standard verification. Maya took the envelope gently. Her hand didn't shake. Lena's eyes darted between them. "He never told me," she whispered. Maya finally looked at her. "He never told me he'd left this." She opened the envelope silently. Inside, a single folded sheet of Daniel's stationery. At the top, in his unmistakable handwriting, 5 words. "If you're reading this, good." Below, a few lines. "Apologies. or something close to them. A warning about unfinished business, a vague reference to making things right. My way. Maya smiled faintly. It wasn't remorse. It was control. Even from beyond the grave, Daniel was still writing the rules. But this time, Maya wasn't playing. She folded the letter and tucked it back into the envelope. "I'll see the lab about paternity," she said simply. Lena stood abruptly and walked out. Silas reached for another juice box. Maya looked at him, then at the shocked faces around the table. Daniel Voss was dead, but his consequences were still very much alive. The walls of Daniel's study were lined with leather-bound books and dark wood shelves, untouched since the day he disappeared from the sky. Lena stood in the center of it all, arms crossed, lips pursed, as if the air itself was lying to her. Daniel had always kept things hidden. Password-protected folders, private conversations with no witnesses, locked drawers with keys only he had access to. But now that he was gone, she had the legal right to everything, at least in theory. She opened the top drawer of his desk. The key Gregory had handed her after the will reading slid in perfectly. Inside, a thick manila envelope labeled in bold marker, MR. She pulled it out slowly. Inside were printed transcripts, emails, text message logs, and internal reports. From Daniel's security team, her eyes scanned the documents with growing nausea. Subject: Maya Rios. The reports detailed Maya's last known address, movements tracked across state lines, surveillance stills, even a grocery store receipt. Lena's fingers trembled as she flipped the pages. There were logs showing payments, large monthly deposits sent through shell companies to a West Coast bank, all dated after Maya had supposedly vanished. But she hadn't vanished. She had been watched, funded, managed. Lena reached the bottom of the file and found something worse, a non-disclosure agreement, unsigned, offering Maya $1.2 million in exchange for silence and custody waiver. Attached was a note from Daniel in his familiar shorthand. For contingency, keep eyes on her regardless. Lena dropped the papers on the desk, heart pounding. So Daniel hadn't been blindsided by a child. He'd known, controlled, manipulated from afar. And yet, the will, the letter, the trust, those didn't read like a man erasing someone. They read like someone orchestrating something. A chill crept up Lena's spine. She opened Daniel's laptop. The desktop was clean. Too clean. She clicked into a hidden folder labeled Projects. Then a subfolder marked Exit. Inside were encrypted files, but one video had no password. She hesitated, then played it. The screen lit with Daniel's face. He sat in a dark room, shadows dancing across his jawline. The video looked recent, post-April at least. "If you're watching this," he said, "then I'm already gone, or I want you to think I am." He leaned forward. "Legacy isn't about what you leave behind. It's about who remembers you. And why?" Lena paused the video, heart racing. She rewound and watched again. It wasn't grief that twisted in her gut. It was dread. What if Daniel hadn't died in that crash? What if he staged it? And if he had, why leave breadcrumbs? Lena stood in the center of the study, surrounded by secrets. Daniel had kept everything except truth. She pulled out her phone and searched for Maya's last known address. It was time they talked. Not about the child, but about the man they both thought they knew. Because suddenly Lena wasn't sure Daniel was in the past, and if he was alive, he was still playing the game. The letter arrived on a Tuesday. No return address, no sender name. Just Mo Rios scrawled in blocky handwriting across the front. Maya stared at it on her kitchen table like it had teeth. It was the kind of envelope that didn't feel like paper. It felt like a key. A trigger. A ghost knocking without permission. She turned it over. No postmark. No postage. Someone had delivered it. Hand-delivered. Which meant someone had been at her door without her knowing. Close. Silent. She reached for it slowly and opened the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No salutation. Just 3 words. I see you. Her fingers tightened around the letter. The room around her felt suddenly smaller. Too still. Too quiet. Silas was napping in the next room. The soft hum of the baby monitor pulsed steadily on the counter. Maya forced her breath to steady. This was a mistake, a cruel prank, or something worse. She checked the door. Locked. She checked the windows. Nothing. Then she sat down and let her body shake. For years she had lived like Daniel Voss was dead, long before the plane crash ever confirmed it. But now, she wasn't sure. Flashback, 3 months before the crash. She had received a wire transfer from a new account. $25,000, no name, just the same as always. Clean, discreet. Except this time, a note came with it. You're safer this way. She hadn't mentioned it to anyone. Not even Nate, her only friend from the town she'd settled in. She didn't want to give weight to something she couldn't explain. But now, sitting at her table with those 3 words in her hand, everything felt too heavy to hold. Back in the present. Maya opened the drawer beneath the sink, the one where she kept old files, printed statements, and the last photo she had of Daniel, blurry, taken at a distance, the day she found him stepping into a car in Soho with a woman she didn't recognize. It was the moment she decided she was done chasing closure. And yet, here it was, slipped under her door like an afterthought. She called her lawyer first. He told her to document everything. Then she called Nate. I got a letter, she said, voice low. Not from the court, from him. There was silence on the other end. I mean Daniel. Nate's breath caught. You're sure? I know his handwriting. I know the weight of his voice, even when it's written. Should I come over? She looked toward the door again. Her reflection in the hallway mirror stared back, older, steadier, but not less afraid. Yes, she said. Come. When Nate arrived, he found her sitting cross-legged on the floor with old files scattered around her. Dates, statements, deposits. They formed a timeline, one she never asked for but now had to piece together. He never let go, she murmured. Even when he left, he was watching. Nate glanced at the letter again. Why now? I don't know, she said. Maybe he's gone. Maybe he's still out there, but one thing's clear. She held up the paper. Dead men don't write letters. Nate looked around the room. You think he faked it? Maya didn't answer. She just looked at Silas's bedroom door. Still closed, still peaceful. If Daniel was alive, she knew one thing for certain. He didn't send this letter for forgiveness. He sent it because control was his religion, and he had just reminded her, from wherever he was, that ghosts don't cry, but they do come back. For the first year after Daniel left, Maya survived by becoming someone else. She left New York with nothing but a duffel bag and a prepaid phone. Her baby bump barely visible, her name stripped from leases and hospital records. She moved west, past the cities, past anyone who might recognize her, and landed in a town small enough to forget itself. She called herself Marie Rivers. She dyed her hair darker, wore glasses she didn't need, and avoided questions. At UAlm, the local library, she shelved books for minimum wage and read to toddlers on Thursdays. No one knew she once sat in boardrooms. No one knew her son was the heir to an empire that didn't want him. Maya thought anonymity would be freedom. But even there, even in the quiet, money still found her. Every month, a wire transfer. Clean, untraceable, always just enough. She had convinced herself it was coincidence. A forgotten savings account. An old emergency fund Daniel never deactivated until the first letter arrived. No return address. No name, just a typed note. You're doing better without me, keep going. She didn't tell anyone. She didn't stop cashing the transfers either. Back in the present, Maya sat on the floor of her rented cottage, papers fanned around her like puzzle pieces that suddenly fit. She now understood what she hadn't wanted to believe. Daniel hadn't just watched her, he enabled her. He let her vanish, but only far enough that he could still see her. Control her. Fund her freedom just enough to keep her quiet, to keep her from speaking, to keep her believing she'd won, but it hadn't been escape. It had been containment. Nate crouched beside her, reviewing bank statements and dates. He kept you on a leash, he murmured. No, she said softly. He built me a cage and painted the bars gold. She opened the folder marked with the earliest payment dates. They aligned with every major step in her son's life. The week he started crawling, his first birthday, the ER visit after a fall. Every time she needed help, somehow the money had already been there. Daniel hadn't left them. He had studied them. Why? Nate asked. Why go through all this trouble? He could have just cut you off. Maya shook her head. Because letting me disappear wasn't enough. He needed to own the silence. He couldn't risk the world knowing he'd left his own child. And now? Nate asked. What's this all leading to? Maya looked down at the letter again. I see you. Now, she said, standing slowly. Now it feels like he's coming back. She gathered the files and dropped them into a duffel bag. I'm going to New York. Nate stood. And do what? I'm going to the one place he could never control. The truth. She walked to Silas's room, opened the door quietly and watched him sleep. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. This was about reclaiming everything he tried to erase. The office of Elias Voss was nothing like his brother's. No glass walls, no art, just concrete, steel, and silence. Elias sat behind a matte black desk, fingers laced, expression unreadable. He was older than Daniel by 9 years but carried none of his charm. Where Daniel was fire, Elias was ice, slow burning, calculating, and impossible to melt. Maya had waited 10 minutes before being called in. She didn't bother sitting. I know who you are, Elias said calmly, and I know what you want. Then this will be a short conversation, Maya replied. He smirked. I doubt it. A file folder sat on his desk. She recognized the handwriting on the tab. Daniel's. Daniel left behind more than messes, Elias said. He left assets in motion, contingency plans, shadows. And you, unfortunately, are one of them. Maya folded her arms. I'm not a loose end. I'm the truth. Elias tilted his head. Let me be direct, Ms. Rios. You're standing on the edge of a machine that doesn't like exposure. You have a child with my brother's face, and now, thanks to that codicil, a legal stake in everything he built. Built? Maya laughed once. He ran. He hid. Then he left breadcrumbs just to see who would bleed to follow them. Elias's jaw twitched. What do you want, public acknowledgement, payout, your 15 minutes on a documentary about the bastard son of a fallen tycoon? No, Maya said evenly. I want to be done being someone else's silence. Elias opened the file. Inside was a printed agreement, typed, crisp, and cold. Here's what I'm offering. A one-time payment. $7 million, tax protected, you disappear. Permanently. No memoirs, no interviews, no lawsuits, no more surprises. Maya didn't look at the paper. You think money replaces accountability? I think it buys peace. For who? Elias stood now, walking to the tall window behind his desk. You don't know the people circling this, he said. Daniel's death raised questions. If you raise more, it won't just be wealth you lose. It'll be your safety. You're threatening me? I'm warning you. Maya stepped closer to the desk. Her voice dropped to a low hum. You think I'm afraid of men who hide behind contracts and glass towers? She leaned in. I've given birth in silence. Raised a son alone. Buried every piece of myself so that boy could have something close to normal. And now, you want me to trade the truth for quiet? Elias didn't respond. Maya smiled bitterly. Your brother didn't fake his death to escape guilt. He did it to control the narrative, even from the grave. But he forgot something. What's that? I'm not the same girl he left. She turned to leave. Elias didn't stop her. He simply said, "If you take this public, there are no guarantees." She paused at the door. "There never were," she said. "That's why I'm still standing." And then she was gone. Elias stared down at the agreement on his desk. The signature line still blank. He knew Daniel too well. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. The envelope arrived with no postage. Again, this time it was Lena who found it, wedged between a stack of sympathy cards and pending legal documents. Her name was scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, but the weight of the package made her stomach turn before she even opened it. Inside was a simple black USB drive, no label, no note, just the digital equivalent of a whisper from the dead. She stared at it for a long time. Then, against her better judgment, she plugged it into her laptop. The screen flickered once, then went black. Then a video began to play. Daniel. Alive. Not in a suit. Not in some boardroom. He sat in what looked like a cabin, wooden walls, a fire crackling in the background. His beard was longer, his eyes were sunken, but his voice was unmistakable. "If you're watching this," he said, "you've outlived the version of me I showed you." Lena's hand trembled as she raised the volume. "I didn't crash," Daniel continued. "Not really. I needed the world to think I had, needed the pressure to stop, the eyes to turn away, because I was suffocating in success built on lies I couldn't keep straight." He laughed bitterly. "And Maya, she was never supposed to keep that child. That wasn't the script, but she did. And every month that passed, I realized she was rewriting the ending without me." Lena stared at the screen, mouth dry. "I left breadcrumbs," Daniel said. "I left money, surveillance, enough to keep her afloat but far enough to pretend it wasn't my fault." He leaned closer to the camera. "Control was always my currency." The fire behind him flared, casting half his face in shadow. "But even I knew the walls would close in eventually, so I created an exit plan, one last performance." He held up a journal. Lena paused the screen. Journal. The spine looked hand-stitched, worn, like it had seen things no one else ever would. She played the video again. "If this ends up in the wrong hands, let it," Daniel said. "I built a kingdom on manipulation. If it collapses, maybe that's justice." He paused, then smiled faintly. "And if Maya's still out there, tell her I was never running from her. I was running from the mirror she held up to me." The video ended. Black screen. Silence. Lena sat frozen, the hum of the laptop fan suddenly louder than everything else. Daniel had faked his death, planned it meticulously, and now, posthumously, he was still dictating how people hurt. She ejected the USB, wrapped it in a cloth, and slid it into her purse. Then she picked up her phone. Maya answered on the second ring. "It's Lena," she said quietly. "We need to talk in person." Maya's voice was calm. "Why?" Lena hesitated. "Because I think he's still here." Maya didn't speak for a moment, then softly, "I know." Lena exhaled. "Then we need to decide. What do we do? With a dead man who won't stay buried?" Maya's voice sharpened. "We finish his story on our terms." Lena hung up and stared at her dark reflection in the laptop screen. Daniel's empire had been made of silence. But now, the women he tried to outmaneuver were finally speaking. It hit Maya in the quietest moment. She was brushing Silas's hair, the morning sunlight pouring through the kitchen window, when her fingers froze mid-stroke. The funeral, the media, the codicil, the sealed letter, all of it, perfectly timed, meticulously placed. Not despite Daniel's death. Because of it. She set the brush down, heart thudding. The funeral wasn't just a memorial. It was a stage. He had designed it like everything else in his life. A curated performance to trigger reactions, provoke loyalty, and unsettle anyone who, and she'd walked straight into it. The late in life will update? The 40% trust share? The video confession sent to Lena? Breadcrumbs, all of it. He wanted her back in the spotlight, not to shame her, not to erase her, to pull her in. She remembered the final line of the letter he'd left her. If you're reading this, good. That wasn't guilt. That was design. Maya stood and walked into the living room. Her files were still spread across the coffee table. Banking records, surveillance timelines, the copy of the will. She scanned the dates again. The trust fund Daniel had set up, filed 3 days after the plane went down. That wasn't possible. Unless someone else had moved the assets, or Daniel had never boarded that plane at all. Her hands shook as she pulled up her email and searched for the security report Lena had forwarded earlier, the one Daniel's team kept on Maya. Buried at the bottom of the PDF was a single log entry dated 2 weeks before the crash. Clienty. Requested contingency exit simulation. To be executed with media exposure delay. Target, Maya Rios. She swallowed hard. The funeral was never for closure. It was a test, a trigger, a way for Daniel to see who showed up and who still played by his rules. And she had passed. She had stepped back into his world. But what he hadn't counted on was what she had become in the time away. Later that day, Maya met Lena in a downtown cafe. They sat in a corner booth, steam curling from their untouched coffee mugs. I think he staged the crash to reset his narrative, Maya said. The funeral was a baited hook. Lena nodded slowly. He was always a showman. No, Maya said. He was a puppeteer, and we were just roles he kept rewriting. Lena reached into her purse and pulled out the USB drive again. Then maybe it's time to end the performance. Maya met her eyes. You still have contacts in media? Lena's smirk was faint. I used to write headlines that made CEOs lose sleep. Good, Maya said. Because we're not leaking. A scandal. What then? A resurrection, Maya whispered. His, in the worst way. She reached for her bag, unzipping the pocket where Daniel's letter still sat. If he wants to haunt us, let's return the favor. Lena leaned back, expression sharpened. And in that moment, 2 women, once footnotes in a man's story, quietly rewrote the final chapter. Together. The video leaked at 9:17 a.m. By 9:42, it had been reposted to 3 major news outlets. Chirigaon, it was trending globally under the hashtag, The Resurrection File. It began not with drama, but with silence. A still frame. Daniel Voss, sitting in that same wood-paneled cabin, firelight flickering across his face, staring into the lens like he was looking straight through every viewer. Then his voice, low, even, unflinching. This is not an apology. This is a record of my choices. The ones you weren't supposed to see. He laid it out plainly. How he staged the crash using forged manifests and offshore accounts. How he manipulated Maya from a distance. How control wasn't just a habit. It was his design. How he built his empire by silencing people who made him feel small. He even detailed the codicil in his will. It wasn't kindness, he said. It was strategy. I gave the boy just enough to spark chaos, not peace. At one point in the video, he smiled bitterly. Maya Rios thought she escaped. But no one leaves a story I started. The world watched, horrified, and captivated. Maya sat on the floor of her small living room, her back against the wall, Silas asleep in the next room. She'd seen the clip a dozen times now. Not because she needed proof, but because she wanted the world to know. This wasn't a love story. It was a survival story. And for once, the world didn't sympathize with the genius who broke hearts in silence. They rallied around the woman who walked away from him, with nothing but a child in her arms and a spine forged in fire. Reporters reached out. Podcast offers flooded her inbox. Streaming networks called, hungry for the rights. She ignored them all, because this was enough. The resurrection file was no longer just Daniel's voice rising from the dead. It was the end of his hold on her. Weeks passed. His company's board resigned in chunks. Civil lawsuits emerged. Victims spoke. Women Maya had never met, NDAs leaked, and Elias Voss vanished into legal limbo. Daniel's legacy, once sleek and indestructible, crumbled like ash soaked in truth. 1 month later, Maya stood by the ocean with Silas. The wind whipped through, his hair as he drew shapes in the wet sand. "Was Daddy a bad guy?" he asked softly. Maya knelt beside him. "He was lost," she said. "And when people stay lost too long, they hurt the ones who try to find them." Silas nodded like he understood, or like he didn't need to. Maya stood, the sun warm on her face, her hands finally light. She'd carried so many things that weren't hers: guilt, fear, silence. But now she carried only what she chose. She looked out at the waves and whispered, not with anger, not with love, but with freedom, "I see you too." Then she turned away from the water, took her son's hand, and walked forward into a life finally hers. No scripts, no surveillance, no more shadows, just truth. And that, at last, was enough.